Salutations, respective viewers. I am George from Ireland. So this video is about the Electoral College in the United States, and one of my countless faithful viewers requested this one. So anyway, it was founded in 1788, the Electoral College. That's the year the Constitution came out. All right, the revolution started quite some time before. There'd been the Peace of Paris, where the United Kingdom and the rest of the world had recognized that the United States was independent, but there was no constitution until 1788. They had the Articles of Confederation. So prior to 1788, there was a president pro tempore of the Senate, not a president of the United States, president pro tempore of the Senate, and he changed every couple of months. So there was no head of state until 1788, and then George Washington was elected to it. All right, so the United States was a very young country and decided it had to have a head of state. It wasn't going to have a monarchy, it was a republic, but they wanted somebody who was powerful enough but not overmighty, such that he could deprive people of their rights and turn it into a quasi-monarchy, things like that. And remember, there were no term limits to begin with. I know it's a 4-year term, but they could be re-elected a limitless number of times. Only in the 1950s, a constitutional amendment came in saying 2 terms max. So the Electoral College is not a place of education. All right. Previously, the word college could mean lots of different things. It could be an educational institution, or it could be a professional institution, and the word can still mean that. Look at the United Kingdom, the Royal College of General Practitioners. That's for family doctors. It's their professional association. It's not a place of education, even by correspondence course. In the Roman Catholic Church, there's the College of Cardinals, which to some extent is an electoral college. Cardinals, these very, very high-ranking priests, they meet when the Pope dies and they elect a new Pope, and so on. So look at the Holy Roman Empire, which used to exist in, well, Central Europe, I'll say. Germany and some of her neighbours were part of the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Emperor was elected. It was not a hereditary position, but elected initially only by 7 men, like the Archbishop of Mainz or whatever it was, and the King of Bavaria or someone. I can't quite remember the titles. These people also had the title Elector. So it was elected, but only by 7 men. Later, there was the Elector of Hanover, and the British royal family also got that title. So that's that. Anyway, it was decided that the president would not be elected by popular vote. It wouldn't be the ordinary people as such would elect the president directly. Remember, of course, in those days, no women had the right to vote. New Jersey briefly experimented with that. African Americans didn't have the right to vote. Even free African Americans very seldom had the right to vote. And poor white men didn't have the right to vote. Only whites of property were permitted to vote. Only in 1828 did they allow non-property owning white males the right to cast their ballots. And Native Americans were largely excluded from citizenship then. People who have mixed stock white Native American did get citizenship in time. So the states would each be allotted a number of electoral votes towards picking the president. Now, it is a federal system. That's the crucial thing to realize. Beginning with 13 states, okay, it's now 50. And there's the US Congress, which got 2 houses, the Senate, which got 2 senators from each state, regardless of population. The largest state and the smallest state each get 2 senators. And the House of Representatives, which gives a state representation according to its population. Each state, no matter how small, gets 1 representative in the House of Representatives. They don't have to share it between 2 or more states. No, they each get at least 1, and then it goes up and up in accordance with the population of the state. So the smallest state population is Wyoming, with only 500,000 people, and the largest is California, with something like 55 million. So where were we? So there are 538 electors at the moment in the Electoral College, and Wyoming gets 3, Nebraska gets 3, and South Dakota get 3. They've all got a very small population. Right up to the other end at California, which has 55 electoral votes, if I got that right. So it's up to each state to determine how they're going to allot their electoral votes. The majority of these have a winner-takes-all system. That's to say, if you win in New York and it's got 28 electoral votes, if memory serves, then you would get all 28 of those votes. So Hillary Clinton won that fairly comfortably, but she all got all 28. But you might say that's still unfair. I mean, Trump didn't get no votes in New York State. He got over 40% of the vote. So you might say, well, of that 28, why don't we give Hillary Clinton like 16, and he can have 12? That will reflect the proportion. Or I probably got the arithmetic wrong. But no, if you win, even if you win by one vote, you win all 28 of those votes. And all bar 2 states do it that way, right? If you win a state with 10 electoral votes, you win it narrowly, you get all those 10, you don't just get 6 or something like that. Now, there are only 2 which don't do this way. Maine and Nebraska do it along congressional districts. So for the purpose of the House of Representatives, each state can be divided into a number of congressional districts. If you've got a very small population like Wyoming, no, you're not divided because you only get one person in the House of Representatives. If you're of a tiny population like South Dakota, North Dakota, something like that, you have one congressional district for the whole state because you only have one person in the House of Representatives. If you're a large state in population, let's say Florida, then they divided it into, I don't know how many Florida's got, something like 26 electoral districts. Very boringly, they're just numbered. First congressional district, Florida. Second congressional district in Florida. Third congressional district of Florida. Fourth congressional district, and so forth. They don't say Northeast Florida, Southwest Florida, Central Florida. They don't say Panhandle. They don't say Miami. They don't say Dade County. They're not given toponyms or points of the compass. No, just numbered. So what Maine and Nebraska do is they divide it along their congressional districts, and whoever gets the most vote in this congressional district will get that electoral college vote. So Maine, I don't know how many electoral votes they have. Let's say it's 4, fairly small population. If Hillary Clinton won 3 districts, then she would get 3 congressional votes, and if Trump won 1, he'd get 1. Nebraska, I don't know, let me guess, it's got 4 electoral votes. Supposing Trump won 2 and Hillary won 2, they'd each get 2 electoral college votes out of Nebraska, and blah, blah, blah. So what they do is they take the number of senators for each state plus the number of representatives, add those together, and that's the number of electoral votes you'll get out of that state. 55 from California, the largest. Second largest is Texas with 38. Florida, New York, very large. Ohio, slightly below that. Washington, D.C. does have electoral votes, can vote towards the presidency. There was a constitutional amendment in the 60s saying, okay, they can vote for the presidency, and they have the same number as the minimum number for any state, which is 3. Even if their population became higher, it would still just be 3 for Washington, D.C. Because Washington, D.C. is supposed to be neutral between the states, which they carved a bit out of Virginia and a bit out of, is it Maryland, to create Washington, D.C. Washington District of Columbia. That's not Washington State, which is on the far side of the country, it's on the Pacific coast. So that's a system to take into account the federal nature of the United States. The 13 colonies, they all had a direct relationship with the United Kingdom, not really a relationship with each other. They started the revolution, they formed their Continental Congress, they started to band together, and if they were going to join the United States, well, they had to make sure there'd be states' rights, there'd be a wide degree of autonomy. And people were worried that the states with larger populations would really hold sway, and the smaller states would be disregarded. So the beauty of this system, if there is any, is that even the smaller states matter. Now, it's widely criticised. Some of the flaws of it are that there's an excessive focus paid on swing states, such as Florida, which could go either way. California, New York, fairly safe for the Democrats. Texas, fairly safe for the Republicans. Ohio is a bit of a battleground state. So much money is put into these states. So much of the candidates' time is spent here and there. The tiny states with very few electoral votes are largely overlooked. You might say, well, that's fair because that's in proportion to the size of their population. Put it this way, California's got a population something like 110 times larger than that of Wyoming. So on that basis, you might expect that 110 times more attention would be paid to Wyoming than California. So arguably, this excessive attention paid to the swing states defeats the very objective of the Electoral College. The U.S. territories don't get to vote for the presidency. A U.S. territory is not a U.S. state. U.S. territories are places like Puerto Rico and where is it? Nauru, I can't remember, Guam, someplace in the Pacific Ocean. Years ago, about 8 years ago, Puerto Rico voted they'd like to become a state, but that hasn't happened because they'd be a fairly large one. They'd be about 30th in population. They'd have, 5 people in the House of Representatives. That would help the Democrats even more. It's a very heavily Democratic island, Puerto Rico, so the Republicans will find excuses not to admit them. So you could argue that's unfair. They are US citizens, the people of Puerto Rico or the other US territories. So what happens is there's a presidential election every 4 years, the second Tuesday in November. It's never been cancelled. What's happened? Civil War, the Second World War, it always goes ahead. And then, so people vote in their states. And, if you win the most votes in that state, then that's it. Or you get all the Electoral College votes from that state, except, of course, in Nebraska and Maine, as I already explicated. Then in each state capital, electors will meet. The electors are just activists nominated by the state government. It's a day out for them. And so you'll meet in, where is it, like Montpelier, or I can't think of other ones, Raleigh or Austin, or wherever it may be, Sacramento, and you'll go through the motions of casting a ballot paper. Now, you're mandated to vote the way your state has ordered you to vote. Even if you're a Democrat, if Trump won your state, you've got to vote for him, a Republican, because that's what the state decided. And you must not break faith with the instructions you've been given. You're not voting for yourself personally, you're doing it on behalf of the state. But people complain about faithless electors, those who do not bear faith to the way they were ordered to vote on behalf of the people. And they deliberately vote against that, or indeed they just spoil their paper, they don't vote. If you write something on it, you tear it up, or you deliberately vote for both candidates or something. Incidentally, we always focus on two candidates. There are actually lots. There are actually about 10 candidates. We know the two major ones, but there's Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party. The Reform Party had somebody. The Green Party, Dr. Jill Stein, she was fairly major. And there were a few others. That Feather woman. Anyway, there are only two of serious significance. Only one president was ever elected unanimously, and that was George Washington. The second president was John Adams. And the first faithless elector was then when he deliberately voted against John Adams because he thought that only Washington should be elected unanimously. So the result in each state capital is then declared. We know what it's going to be. And then that's the ballot boxes, the ballot papers are then taken to Washington, D.C., where they can be counted afresh. And the result announced in the House of Representatives by the Vice President. Sometimes, like Al Gore, has to announce that he's lost because he was standing for the presidency in 2000. Now, of course, he got more of the popular vote and not enough of the electoral votes. So he pipped George W. Bush at the post, beating him by 0.5% the popular vote. But because George W. Bush won Florida by the narrowest of margins, about 500 votes, he got all the electoral votes for Florida, something like 26, which put him over the line. So it was highly controversial. There were court cases about hanging chads. Were the ballot papers misread? Because the ballot paper is what you actually vote on. Then you put it into a ballot box, and you had to clip a hole, beside the name of your candidate. And there were hanging chads. Is this hole, is it closer to George W. Bush or Al Gore? Should we just declare this to be a spoiled paper? It doesn't count. Anyway, eventually it was decided that George W. Bush had won. Bill Clinton later castigated him, saying George W. Bush won fair and square, 5-4 in the Supreme Court, because it went to the United States Supreme Court to stop the recount. I think they did count again in Florida. They found that actually Bush did win it very narrowly. But yes, overall, he lost the popular vote and he won in the Electoral College. That happened thrice in the 19th century. Anyway, again in 2016, a candidate who lost the popular vote, that's to say Donald Trump, he won in the Electoral College because his votes were more efficiently distributed towards the smaller states. It's not true that the Republicans win all the smaller states. They win quite a few, but the Democrats are doing okay in some of the states with small populations in New England. If you don't know much about the geography of the United States, New England is the northeast corner of the United States. Everything north of New York State, like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. Have I forgotten one? I don't think so. There are half dozen of them. So that's that. Now, supposing that they both get an equal number each, all right, what happens? If it's equally divided, the Electoral College, then the House of Representatives has to decide. That's only happened once, and that was over the vice presidency. Now we have a ticket. You have to vote for Trump and Pence together. Trump to be president, Pence to be vice president. You can't pick Trump to be president and Kaine to be vice president. No. A ticket. They go together. If you want to pick Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine together, you can do that. You can't pick Hillary Clinton to be president and somebody else be vice president. No. It's a ticket. The two go as a pair. They're an item. That's a package. Okay, so Democrats tend to load the system now because 2 times out of the last 5, they've won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. Or take a slightly longer view, the Democrats should be optimistic since 6 times out of the last 7, they've won the popular vote. 2004, George W. Bush won the popular vote. Well, he was a war president and the economy is going fairly well. Yeah, incumbency helps. If you already hold the office, usually re-elected. So that was that. It was about the states, not about ordinary people. Bear in mind, this comes from a time when it was pre-democratic. They didn't think all white men should be allowed to vote, let alone everybody else. We might say times have changed, and this has got to change. Or we could do this on a more proportional basis. Wyoming put it down to one electoral vote to be closer to reflecting its population, redistributed the votes from the very small states in terms of population to the larger ones like California, Texas, and Florida, and so forth. You could have a two-round system, such as in France, the Ukraine, Romania, Russia. In fact, it's never been needed in Russia. If no one candidate gets over 50% of the popular vote in the first round, then all but the top two candidates are eliminated, and the top two go through. Or like Republic of Ireland, we have rank order preferences. Right, a 1 beside your favourite candidate, a 2 beside your second favourite candidate, a 3 beside your third favourite candidate, and so forth. If nobody gets over 50% of the first preferences, then we eliminate the lowest ranked candidate with the lowest number of first preferences and redistribute his or her second preferences amongst the higher ones. And if that doesn't put anybody over the line, we eliminate the second lowest candidate and redistribute his or her second or whatever lower preferences to other people, and so forth until somebody wins. Now, the trouble with that system is even if you've got the most first preferences, supposing you've got 40% of the first preferences, and then so they had to eliminate the lowest ranked candidate, his or her second preferences are redistributed, and somebody who only got 35% of the first preferences might actually get 50% once the second preferences have been taken into account. So he or she might win. But there we are. But at least under the Irish system, whoever wins has got majority support somehow, even if there's a second choice or a third choice. And there's all this worry about wasting votes on minor candidates like Libertarians and Greens. There are indirect elections in other countries, such as in India. There's a sort of federal system as well, and the states all decide who they're going to vote for. It goes like that. So it's not a popularity contest. It's not name recognition counts, which is what really helped Trump. So people say the trouble with that, the Indian system is too much of a politician's president, or likewise on Australia 20 years ago when they proposed ridding themselves of the monarchy, and the model they put forward for electing a new head of state or president was savaged by the monarchists, saying, "Oh, it's a political system, and just politicians are going to do it their own way. It's not going to be directly elected, and blah blah blah." So they hadn't got a decent model to put forward in room of the monarchy. So that's that. I mean, I am against the electoral system of the United States, as in all sorts of ways, but partly the Electoral College. And you might say, well, because we're states, we have to do that. The small states would get ignored. I would say that, they don't get ignored. They get enough attention according to their population. And actually, it's just the real battleground states, which is bellwether ones like Florida, get loads of attention. But Hillary Clinton, she lost some ones which people thought were going to be hers. According to the psephology, these look to be fairly safe for her. Well, they read the tea leaves wrong. Anything else to say about the Electoral College? It's not going to be changed because it's very difficult to effect constitutional change. You need over 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate. Put it this way, there's been no constitutional amendment passed for over 50 years. And the Republicans like this system, and they've got the majority of the Senate, and although, they don't have the majority in the House of Representatives, they still got about 45% of the people there. There's no way on earth it's going to happen, or else you have to get 3/4 of the states to agree. Because then the Republicans feel they won't have a prayer. And, the House, even the Vice President matters. Supposing the Senate is equally divided, he will cast the deciding vote, things like that. All right, that's enough for me about the Electoral College.